Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our weekly Hebrew word study. I pray that you are enjoying it and just finding the rich treasures that are in God's Word that can be harvested and dug out through the looking at the original Hebrew language. So today we go to a very interesting portion of Scripture in 1 Samuel chapter 29. This whole chapter is devoted to David. It's devoted to, David is running from Saul. We know that Saul in the last episode had inquired of the witch of Endor, who told him of his demise. And now we come back to another scene in the drama here, in that David obviously had been running from Saul and took refuge with the Philistines and with King Achish. And here um, we saw previously that the king wanted David to fight with him and actually fight against Israel. And if you remember, that was a few episodes back, and that put David in a tough spot. He obviously didn't want to fight against Israel, but somehow he won the friendship of King Achish, and Achish wanted him right by his side as his personal bodyguard along with David's men. And there was a little bit of an exchange where David answered very vaguely to the king about staying involved with him as he fought. And also, we know that David was secretly raiding the cities of the Philistines and looting them, and basically that was how he made his living. But he left no witnesses, and so it seems that he never got caught for that, and so he's still in good graces with the Philistines. So we get to chapter 29 here, and this whole chapter, while it's a short one, is devoted to where is David, what's his relationship with King Achish, and how is David getting out of this very precarious situation that he's in, whereas he doesn't want to fight against Israel. He doesn't want to fight against God's anointed. Um, he doesn't want to be in the midst of this. So here's where we pick up today. So it says in verse 1 that the Philistines gathered together all the armies. They were going to come against Israel in Jezreel. And then as they're all there in alignment for inspection in verse 2, we see that the Philistines pass by, and then in the midst of this, here's David and his men. And suddenly these other Philistine princes go, Whoa, in verse 3, what are these Hebrews doing here? Interesting, he didn't call them Israelites. He must have understood that, they had broken away, but still there's some concern here. And here's where we look for the movement of God's divine presence in the midst of this. And you know that God's hand is upon David, and just seeing how God begins to move in people who have no idea they're being used by God. And so the princes of these Philistines say, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" And look, Achish sticks up for David. He says, first they say to him, "Is this not the same David who was right by King Saul and his servant?" And but Achish says, "Yes, he was, but he has been with me these days and years." So very interesting phrase in Hebrew, Yamim or Zeh Shanayim. And so it gives the idea of plurality. Actually, it's a duality with Shanayim for at least 2 years. And so we don't know exact time, but it's kind of an interesting phrase. So basically, Achish is just saying, David's been with me all this time. It's been a couple years, and I found no fault in him since he uses the word defected to me. The word is nafal, which is the word used to fall, implying that he fell from the graces of King Saul and has come over to join with Achish. And so Achish is uh, somewhat, obviously protecting David and seems to really like David. But verse 4 chimes in here that they are not so happy with this and says they were angry. This word for angry, um, Vayiksufu is really interesting, but they were angry. And so obviously they weren't mad like they were going to go and kill David. Um, Again, knowing that the Bible has very few words to describe these various emotions. And so we see this word angry here being used in the same way that is sometimes attributed to God's wrath and God's anger. And when we see it attributed to God, we struggle with what kind of level of anger God was exhibiting. So here, keeping that same thought that here the princes of the Philistines were angry. Well, they weren't angry like they were going to kill David and kill Achish. They were just concerned. They had strong concerns and were wondering what's going on here. To me, this is a very low level of emotion. It is not in a intensive PL form. It is in just a regular Cal form, which is just a textbook. It gives you no emotion whatsoever, but it is still the word for showing that somehow they were stirred within them. And so the reason for me pointing this out is obviously the Philistines weren't in a level of anger that sometimes we like to, or we are led to think that God is angry in when he behaves in a certain way. And so I want to point this out that this is a same word used here, but just goes to show that displeasure would be a much better interpretation of the Philistine princes with Achish. And so how they respond is they just tell him, make this guy go back. So again, knowing that understanding of the emotion that they were feeling, they just said they wanted David to go back and let him not go to battle with us because they didn't really trust him. And if he saw the battle turning, maybe he'll, switch back again and be in allegiance with Saul. And and then they point out, remember verse 5, this is David, that they obviously heard the song. I think that's kind of interesting because when we first heard this song, this is after Goliath was slain. This was sung by the women when David came back to where Saul was, but somehow this song became a top 40 hit and was played on every radio station in the Middle East. And the Philistines knew that this song had gone forth. It was a famous song. They probably even knew the tune. Um, and so they were saying, hey, you remember this song that was sung about David? Why do you think he got that reputation? And then we get to verse 6. And so Achish calls David and says to him, and this is so profound, he says, Elav Chai Yahweh, for as Yahweh lives, as the Lord lives. Um, why was Achish pronouncing the divine sacred name of Yahweh, the sacred name of Israel's God, when he was a Philistine serving Dagon and all the other false gods? Here, Achish is in a respectful way, um, invoking somewhat of a invocation of the one true God in relationship to the life of David, almost like a oath or a vow, saying, that he's calling upon um, as Yahweh lives, to stand behind him and to show his sincerity here. The fact that he uses the word Yahweh to me indicates that David had a very profound spiritual effect on Achish, and that Achish bonded with David and even had an affinity towards David's God. I find this pretty incredible that in the midst of living with the Philistines, and in the midst of being away from Israel, David was able to maintain a relationship with God that was notable and commendable by a pagan king. And for he says that David has been upright and good in my sight and going with me and supporting me. He says he's not found one bit of evil, one bit of bad. The word ra'ah is used for evil or bad. I have not found one tiny bit of bad in him since the day he came to me. I think that's quite a commendable compliment, and it shows the influence that David had. There's a whole story here. that I can see on how we behave in the midst of people that maybe we don't have a close religious affinity with, but yet they can see God working in us and see God in us and be able to speak good about us um, when we're in their midst. So, but anyway, he wasn't convincing. The Philistines, the other ones really pushed on him hard. And so verse 7 says, go return in peace, go back, because we don't want to make these other guys mad anymore. And I bet you David was really breathing a sigh of relief. This is God working in his behalf, um, allowing him a get out of this tough spot card free and that he would not have to intervene and be a part of this situation. So God's working on David's behalf. And David even kind of plays it up a little bit. He throws back, he's probably rejoicing in his heart, but yet he throws back a little bit of righteous indignation. So he says, Vayomer David Achish, but what have I done? Ki me asiti, what have I done? um, Uma Ma'atsata Avdecha. What have you found in your servant? My Miyom Asher Hayiti, for as long as I have been with you, Lefanecha Ad Hayom, I have, and this with you is to the presence of, that I've been intimately close to you. We've lived all this time together, worked together, fought together, and what have you found in me that you don't trust? So it's kind of ironic here that David certainly isn't letting on that he always wanted to get out of this situation, and now kind of throws it back at the king, even though he's inwardly rejoicing. And so the king, Achish, answered, I know that you've been good to me. And then here's another beautiful comment. He says, Ata be'ene kamelecha Elohim, or Kalmach Elohim, that you are like an angel in my sight. The word malach is the word used for messenger in many places. It's also used as the same word for angel because an angel is a messenger from God. So this kaf in the front of it is the preposition. It's translated as an angel, could be translated as like an angel, but it uses the word angel of Elohim, not Yahweh. So this is referencing Elohim, which is the more of the masculine side of God, the warrior, champion, deliverer side of God that obviously Achish has seen both sides of David. He's seen the Yahwistic or the merciful side of David's God displayed in David, and he's seen the champion and the warrior side of God through the term described as Elohim in the character of David. And again, very much trying to be in favor of David, but knows that he can't. So he says, verse 10, get up early in the morning, take everybody with you, and depart. So, verse 11, as the chapter closes, David rose up early, took his men, and departed. To the land of the Philistines. So he didn't go back to Israel. He found another corner of Philistia where the battle wasn't going on, where Saul and the armies were not, and there he took his residence. And so David gets out of a very tough spot, delivered by God. And again, we see the mercies of God in full display here. Even though the Philistines didn't know it, David surely did, and so do we. So God bless you. Thanks again for being a part of this study. I pray that it's an encouragement to you and look forward to talking with you again next week. Bye bye.